The topic in this lesson is the scene before Islam, but not only before Islam, during the time of Muhammad. In other words, it's pre-Islamic, but it's more than that. Basically looking at political, social, economic conditions at the time of Muhammad, but just before it as well. And then looking also at some values of the people. There were some very interesting things going on. Let's keep in mind that Christianity is there. It wasn't that Muhammad didn't have any contact with Christians. There were Christians all over the place. But the question is what kind of Christianity did he see? Did he see true Christianity? Did he, or did he just hear bickering and see disunity? And we keep in mind that the Bible hadn't been translated into Arabic until 100 years, according to Metzger, 100 years after Muhammad. So we're not sure that he saw the good side of Christianity, that he really understood much of anything. He did get bits and pieces of it, but how much did he understand? So the pre-Islamic scene is the topic today, and plus some political, cultural context, and then looking at some values. One thing to keep in mind is that you have two giant empires at war. One is Christian, and the other is Persian. The name of the Christian one is Byzantine, and the name of the other one is Sasanian. These empires were at war, bitter struggle. In fact, they had fought so long and so hard that they had played one another out. And when Islam came in, it was more or less accepted by people as anything could be better than what we've been through right now. It was the time, well, just after Constantine. And we know something about Constantine. He had decided in 321 that he would conquer in the name of the cross. He declared Christianity to be legal. And this was a change, because before, Christianity was considered to be outside. In other words, they had persecuted Christians, and now it's legal to become a Christian and to be a Christian. And so even you can say popular to be a Christian. In 325, you had the Council of Nicaea. In fact, Constantine himself called it. He called it to settle disputes over the person of Christ, because there were differences. People were arguing and fighting about who Christ is and what he was like. In other words, was he divine? Was he human? And then remember too that at this time, just before Muhammad, Rome had fallen. That is the western part of the Christian Empire. It had been a terrible day, and it had been a shock, needless to say, when Rome fell, pillaged by barbarians. And there was a fellow there who we could liken to Osama bin Laden. His name was Alaric. These barbarians overran Rome, and Rome fell. Rome, the immortal Rome. Rome was not supposed to fall, but it did. And Jerome, the great historian, was so shocked by this that it says he was silent for 3 days. More of a shock than 9/11 was to us, undoubtedly, but something like that, because you see, Rome is so powerful, it's so big, and yet it happened. There were Nestorians around. In other words, they had been persecuted by in the Byzantine Empire for their heresy in reference to the person of Christ. We'll look into that a little bit later, but just keep in mind that they were driven out and they were forced into the hands of the enemies of the Byzantine, into the arms of the Persian Empire, Sasanian, and they were welcomed because, you see, they were now had a common enemy. And so Nestorians were Christians. In other words, they were a little heretical, and it's true that when you look at their theology right now, today, it is heretical. It sounds like it, but they were missionaries, and they did a pretty good job of missions in some ways. In 431, you had the Council of Ephesus. There was also the same issue, primarily trying to figure out what Jesus Christ was. At the time, you had 7 bishoprics in Arabia. This tells you that well, I shouldn't have said at the time, because I should have said that there were 7 bishoprics in 7th century Arabia. In other words, at the time of Muhammad. Muhammad is born in 570. He dies in 632. So the point of that is that there are Christians in and around where Muhammad spends his life. Another issue is the Gnostics, or and along with that, the Orthodox Christians. You have today Coptic Christians in Egypt. The Gnostics were heretics, and weren't the only heretics you had there on the scene, but they're there. They came in contact with Muhammad, apparently. It looks like it. Muhammad must have seen various kinds of Christianity, and he definitely saw disputing Christians. He got the impression they were fighting over who Christ is. Some of the tribes were Christian, these Arab tribes too. So that's what we start with. Also remembering that in the beginning, Muhammad was quite favorable to Christians. In other words, when he was in Mecca, if we could look at his revelatory career spanning 22, 23 years, the first half of it is in Mecca, between 610 and about 610 to 622. In other words, half of it, 12, 13 years in Mecca, and then the same amount of time in Medina. During the first part of his time, his career, he was favorable to the Christians, but then later on, he turned against them, as you see from verses like Surah 9:5 and 9:29. And you have there some very unfriendly things said about Christians, showing the trouble between these two empires. Again, we look at a couple of dates. In 614, Persians take Jerusalem. See what I said? The two empires are at war. And this is right around the time of Muhammad. He's born in 570. Persian and Byzantine empires are at war. And then in 628, Byzantine defeat Persia. In 624, you have the Battle of Badr. That's the battle where Muhammad defeated the forces that came against him from Mecca. And that battle was sort of the Battle of Jericho for Muslims, because they were fewer in number and they won the battle. Next year, 625, was the Battle of Uhud, where Muhammad took a beating. But they didn't give up. The Muslims rallied and they carried on. So some of the things that were going on there that we have just mentioned, the political scene, the military scene, and most importantly, the fact that you have one huge empire, which is Christian, against the Sasanian Empire, which is Persian. In other words, this is where Iran is now, mostly. What about economic and social issues? What was the context? Well, trade. A lot of trade was going on, and Muhammad was a trader. This is where he started. In other words, he was a trader and turned raider. He did both pretty well. He must have been a success as a trader because he worked for a woman called Khadija, and he was called Al-Amin, the faithful one. So probably was literate, probably undoubtedly was capable, and he was trustworthy, and he took caravans. In the beginning, he seemed to be on caravans with his uncle, heading north, coming in contact with Christians and so on. An oral society, he hears the stories that Christians tell him and everyone else. But it's also these Bedouin tribes. Bedouin tribes are pastoral and nomadic. Their lifestyle is one of traveling and so on. Lots of camels, lots of trading and raiding. As I have said, Muhammad seemed to do better than anyone else at raiding and trading. The trade routes at the time of Muhammad are quite significant. Various things, spices coming out of India, west to Sana down here, which was, there were Christians down here as well, and Jews, and Abyssinia is the first Christian empire. And then trade going on up to Mecca, along the Red Sea, various types of things, spices, dyes, gold, pearls, and then on up 280 miles north of Mecca to Medina, by camel, of course. Trade going all over the place. Here's the Persian Gulf, and trade, going on with Egypt, and then going all the way up to Syria. Here's Damascus up here. Lots of trading, and it's not really true to say that Islam was born in the desert. These are urban centers, and lots of trading going on around Mecca and Medina, where Muhammad spent the last half of his life. Poetry was very much in style, appreciated, and the Quran is a poetic book. Yes, it's rough poetry, it's prose as well, but it's first and foremost a book of poetry. And when Muslims, Arabs and non-Arabs, when they memorize the Quran, they do so in rhythmic fashion, and they get into the swing of it, the mood, the motion of it. This is very important. The rhythm is more important than the rhyme, and the literary style of the Quran is such. Having said that, Muhammad denied the fact, or denied being a poet. I guess poets, there was some negative sense about it too. They were these mad poets, and Muhammad said, I'm not a mad poet. So he didn't want to be denigrated in that sense. He wanted people to understand that this was a spiritual thing, and that he was not just one of these mad poets when he received these revelations. Poetry was very popular in Medina, and the Jewish tribes up there were probably pretty good at it. They may have been better at it than Muhammad, because they may have been more educated. And when he got up there, Muhammad wasn't accepted as he thought he would be as a prophet. They made fun of his Arabic, probably made fun of his poetry too. I don't know what all they did, but eventually they had a great falling out. And Muhammad meets more Arab Christians and Arab Jews. As I said in the beginning, he seemed to get along better with the Christians, and then at the end, not so well. But with the Jews, it was really terrible. And he ended up, went from bad to worse, and eventually he came in conflict with those three Arab tribes, Jewish tribes. They were Arabs. He ran two of them out, and the third tribe, the Arab Jewish tribe, he destroyed them. He killed the men and the boys, 700 of them, beheaded them, took the wives and children as captives. It was pretty rough way to do it, but that was the way things were done. What about the social unit? Well, there were clans, and the clan was made up of several families. The tribe made up of several clans. Muhammad was part of the Quraysh tribe, but he never seemed to rise in the leadership of the tribe. Now, God only knows why. It might have been because he was poor. I don't know. But certainly he had the ability to do so. And just keep in mind that Muhammad is part of a tribe, and it was because of that tribe that he existed in the first place. In other words, had it not been tribe protecting him, because tribes stick together, you know, Muhammad would have been a goner. But the tribe stuck with him, even though they didn't always agree with him. You had sheikhs and so on. Let's look at the values. The values of the pre-Islamic scene and the scene at the time of Muhammad is manliness, bravery, loyalty to the group, loyal to the family. They will stick together, and they still do. Hospitality is strong. Generosity is valued, and honor as well as virility. That's very much valued, and patience as well. Well, let's think about the Western cultural priorities. What are they? I think that Western values are these. They're honesty, telling it like it is, efficiency, getting to the point, privacy, individuality, programs and goals, punctuality, and analytical. How many of the Western values are any more biblical than the ones that we just looked at? I think that probably not any more biblical. It is true that honesty is biblical, but then on the other hand, so is generosity. Getting to the point, telling it like it is, well, not so sure. Certainly, patience is biblical, and some of the things that and family loyalty and one thing and another, though it can be taken too far. So I think the point is that Western values too are not necessarily biblical values. Though I'm not trying to be critical here, I realize that Christianity and Judaism, was built on great influence, Judeo-Christian values. But in many ways our values today are not Christian.